So good afternoon, Christine. Thank you very much for your time and for coming to the studio in BrightWolves office.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate your time and also willingness to share your view on the burning issues on the European logistic landscape. This interview is basically following on an article that we are co-writing together, delving into the issues of European logistics and especially the challenges and opportunities of switching from road to rail freight. I think we all know that rail freight is better for the environment, although for years, road freight has been, let's say, the most chosen option for cost and flexibility factors. But now with new regulations, the situation may be changing, and that's basically up to every stakeholder to take the necessary action to make that transition.
Indeed.
Today, our conversation will be to address these elements. I would like to start with getting a bit more to know about Lineas as a company and you as ESG manager, but then also linked to my logistics procurement supply chain background. I would like to get to know what are the challenges you see from your customers' perspective, but also from the sector transitioning perspective.
Yes, indeed.
So maybe first question, who are you? Who is Lineas and what's your role as ESG manager?
We are the largest privately owned rail freight operator in Europe. We used to be part of the Belgian National Railways, but we have been privatized since 2015. The headquarters is in Brussels, but we have permanent establishment in France, in Germany and the Netherlands. In those markets we fared quite well. In Netherlands we are the second, in France the fifth, and in Germany the seventh. So in that short period of time we managed to do well in those countries. We also service big clients, and primarily in the steel sector, such as ArcelorMittal, in the chemical sector, such as BASF, and also in the automotive. Volvo is one of our important clients as well. We drive trains, we drive freight trains. It seems simple, but it's not such a simple operation. We work closely together with subcontractors all over Europe, and we drive trains up from the north until down the south to the east. We focus on customer centricity. We are looking at our operations at the moment to get them as efficient as possible for indeed, as you say, addressing these differences between transport modes such as road.
Very inspiring.
Yes.
To talk about sustainability, I'm keen on having lead by example approach. What's Lineas doing to lower its own impact, even though rail is the least emitting
indeed,
transportation
rail
mode?
is the most sustainable transport mode. From various perspectives, we are the most energy efficient. We emit 6 times less CO2, and we are the solution for congestion. But when you look at societal costs, we are the safest mode. So our accidents and they are zero compared to road, where you have a huge cost of accidents involving heavy trucks all over Europe. What is Lineas doing itself? Because we like to walk the talk, of course. And it's a very serious thing. ESG is within Lineas one of the 4 pillars for future growth. It is really on the table of the top management, and it is inscribed in our strategy. What we are doing, we have been validated science-based targets, meaning that we are committed to reduce our CO2 emissions with 42% in scope 1 and 2. So that means we have to find a solution for the fossil fuels, because we still have diesel locomotives that we operate. We have to find a solution for greening our electricity resources. And this is already covering 50% of the footprint. When you look at scope 3, the biggest chunk there is the subcontractors. And here we also leverage throughout the supply chain to get also our subcontractors on board in committing to at least science-based targets equivalent objectives. So that being said, we have also the eco-driving, which is the practice that is introduced in our way of driving the trains. It's comparable with the eco-driving that you as a car driver would apply, but it requires a lot of training, a lot of awareness building. It's focus at this moment. Also, phasing out fossil fuels will only be possible if you have a good alternative, and in that perspective we are rolling out the use of HVO, and we are testing the use of FAME to get also from that side a future-proof solution. Looking at the car fleet, we have of course also a car fleet. We have designed a plan to green it over 5 years time, because it's a lot of lease cars and you need to get out of the lease before you can make a change. We have a well-thought-through ESG strategy, which is based on 4 pillars, but okay, I think from an environmental perspective that is the most important actions that we undertake.
And I think it also makes sense to lead by example. You cannot expect companies to follow you on sustainability if you're not driving into that direction and understanding. Through my experience as a logistics buyer, I had to make often the comparison between rail and truck, and rail freight is often perceived as more expensive. What's your view on the current business case, and how do you think it will evolve, and what is needed to make it evolve?
Yeah, indeed, you're right. It is perceived as more expensive, and there's a good reason for that. If you drive a train, you need sufficient volume to justify the let's say, startup costs. Before you drive a train, you make costs, and if you need this sufficient volume, you also need to consolidate the volume. You need to massify the volume. That involves extra costs, and if you have extra costs, you need sufficient long distance to absorb that kind of startup cost, if you want. But this is not the full story, of course. If you look at the market, then there is important factors of discrimination if you compare us with road freight sector. For instance, there is regulations that put us at a disadvantage, such as the language. Regulation requires a train driver to speak a B1 level in the country he drives through. So it means that our drivers need to talk German when they drive to Germany. This is a requirement that doesn't exist in the road sector. I mean, any person who gets his driver's license can run big trucks all over Europe. So that is a big disadvantage. And it's also, driving a train requires sufficient knowledge about the line that you're driving. It's a bit like air pilots. But there's no train drivers schools as such. So we organize our training ourselves. And that takes 6 to 9 months for a person to complete the training. During that time, they are employed by us. So this doesn't count for truck drivers, and that is also a big difference. But the biggest difference comes from the fact that rail operations, we drive over 80% of the ton kilometers on electrified tracks. That means that the energy that we use, more than 80% is electricity, for which we already pay the emission rights, whereas emission rights are not being levied on the diesel. This is an important cost difference.
Do I understand then that the gap can be bridged at the moment the regulations are putting all mode of transport on the same level, basically creating a playing level field?
Creating the playing field would require that indeed each transport mode takes and pays for the fair share of the external cost that it causes. And the external cost, it's the CO2 emissions, but it is also air quality. It is also congestion. Congestion represents a huge cost to society. Also here, when you compare the truck with the train, driving one train takes 50 trucks off the road. As I already mentioned, the safety of trains, one cannot find its comparison in the other modes. We have zero tolerance. Our safety policies, they are one of the highest one can reach. On the other hand, if you look at casualties, road casualties, what you see is, although the transport over road has been making improvements, what you see is that the improvements are not going that fast when we talk about heavy duty vehicles. So, and that represents a huge cost. If you take the external cost of congestion and accidents, then you quickly talk about over 600 million euros of cost to society, only for Belgium, on a yearly basis.
That's quite a massive amount. We tend to see rail as a less flexible or less adaptive way of transporting things, and that's why we usually prefer road. What's your view on that, also with the events that we could have seen in the past years?
It's a fair comment, and when it comes down to flexibility, of course, using rail transport requires that you have a connection to the rail when you start the transport. Whereas a truck, he can drive door to door, whatever the situation at the customer's premises. Rail is really heavy investing in new technologies that should enable rail to get more flexible and more reliable. And I'm talking about technologies such as digital automatic coupling, autonomous driving, for instance, for shunting operations. I'm talking about a digital platform that would enable exchange of data amongst operators, increasing also transparency. So that is kind of the homework that the railway has to take himself. That requires huge investments. Also, for instance, the ERTMS. Here is also where the government can and should, I think, help already for getting a standardized version of ERTMS rollout in all countries in Europe, so that also the interoperability can be approved. Clear positive evolutions that will enable rail to get to this required level of flexibility and reliability. If you look at other evolutions, on the other hand, road freight, they are at a lower cost now because, as I said, they don't pay for the carbon. And secondly, they still can run their entire operations on diesel that is far much cheaper than electricity. But this is two factors that will change in the near future. It is clear that transportation needs to start decarbonizing better sooner than late. Transportation sector is one of the sectors that still increases its emissions, whereas all other sectors are decreasing. This decarbonization one can only achieve if one can create an equal playing field. I expect with road being integrated in ETS2, where I think once we are in 2030, because there's a transition mechanism, once we are there, that it might increase the cost compared to the situation now with more than 20%. And I also think that electricity will get not cheaper, but the cost advantage between electricity and diesel that we know today, I'm sure that will disappear in the future as well. And then there is the other issues. The congestion is an important one. The roads, especially if you look at Belgium, there's sufficient roads. There's already too many roads. So how are we going to absorb the forecasted increase in demand of transport services? That's a pressing question, if you ask me. So.
You already made quite a nice bridge to the next part, is basically what the sector needs to do to transition. And if I understand your message, that basically there needs to be an harmonization of the rail network and a right direction of investment into the right elements. Is there anything else that you think are top priority to be changed in that sense?
Lineas has organized a multi-stakeholder consultation and group sessions to exactly see what would be needed to double the rail traffic, because that was the objective in the government. As long as this market distortions exist, that there's no level playing field, then I think the government should step in one way or another. It's clear that market mechanisms haven't functioned here and are not functioning. So then the government should step in either through regulation, taxing, but also in supporting through subsidies. The societal benefit of rail is important enough. It is not subsidies. It is compensating rail for the external benefits that it creates. It's a change of view on things. And then there's, of course, the role of the infrastructure manager. The network that we currently have, at least for Belgium, there is improvement possible when it comes to flow management, capacity management, when it comes to taking a customer-centric approach. There has been actions taken and there is improvements being made, but it should go faster. Yeah. And then if you can create this level playing field, customers should follow as well. And it is true, for a customer, rail operations are complex. And for a customer to follow suit here, it is needed that more insight and awareness is being created.
What do you think is needed for, let's say, customers or, let's say, logistics users that have not made that switch to rail already? Yeah. What do you think it's missing to convince them to make that switch?
Well, I think rail is still unknown to a lot of companies that could benefit from rail, and the unknown is the unloved. That's what we used to say. So I think there needs to be more insight and awareness being created. And it is true, integrating rail operations into existing logistics processes and procedures, that is not an easy thing to do. It requires some changes. Now, this is something which we have identified as well as Lineas, because as a railway undertaking, you have to take your responsibility as well. We have designed the Lineas platform, which is a multi-channel, fully integrated platform that connects kind of the supply and the demand of the service with the customer in the center of the platform. And it provides real-time data. In that platform, you can, at any moment in time, see the estimated time of arrival of the train. But it also provides the reporting on what has happened, and it also supports activities such as planning. It is really a end-to-end, one-stop shop that Lineas offers to its customer, and that should facilitate integrating rail operations into the existing processes of the customer.
I really like that approach of creating a level playing field, both on the cost side but also on the operational side, making everything comparable and interconnectable, if I may say. Maybe that's leading you to a last question, if you may. How would you envision, say, a post-transition logistic landscape?
How would it look like? Well, I think the most important thing here is that you have this level playing field, and that would require, at least in one way or another, that all transport modes are internalizing their external costs to the same degree. I think if market mechanisms cannot solve that thing, then the government should take its responsibility and, in one way or another, repair the distortions that exist, and for as long as they exist. So I think this is the first thing. And in this ideal world, I think we would have a rail network that is fully interoperable, where capacity is being used to its most efficient level, and where we have very cooperative agents, not only the infrastructure manager, but also where we have open exchange of information, where also new services can be developed, and where rail has the possibilities to answer changing needs of customers. And I think if all that happens, and one can make that clear to potential customers, then I think customers will come in any way.
That's a very good conclusion. Thank you very much for your insights, Christine.
It's my pleasure.
I think that discussion underscores the urgent need for action and transformation to create a level playing field at all levels in the chain. There needs to be actions on two sides. One is the governmental institutions that needs to act. They must act in implementing the right legislations and investment to develop that rail network, and also creating fairness comparison between rail and road. I also want to address also the shippers that may look at this interview or read our article, is that we should not wait for the regulations to come. I think, as you said, the complexification of the network, because adding rail into road, it's adding complexity.
Exactly.
It's a very great opportunity for innovation and collaboration.
Indeed. I couldn't summarize it better.
Thank you very much for the time.